Hey, KT here. Last few weeks, we've really unpacked the concept of being identified in Christ. To understand that we've been partakers of an exchanged life, a new identity, that it's Christ living in and through us. But when we sin again, what about then? What about when we get caught up in habitual sin? Something that's been plaguing you most of your life, or something that's new, a new temptation, something that's come along. How do you feel about those things? Does it undo what Christ did for us? Do we lose our salvation, etc., etc.? It's so important to understand this, to ever have any peace in your walk with God. There's a few basic things that we have to understand, and that is viewing these things through the timeline of the cross. And what I mean by that is prior to the cross, the sacrifice hadn't been made. We were still under sin. But the Bible tells us that after the cross, through the sacrifice that Christ made, that he took away the sins of the world. Reading out of Hebrews. So Christ was sacrificed once to take away the sins of the many people, and he will appear a second time, not to bear sin, but to bring salvation to those who are waiting for him. Now, on his second coming, why is he not going to bear sin? Well, because he took sin away, the consequence of sin. The wages of sin were death, and he paid that debt. He died the death. And in that payment, the reconciliation was made in full. Now, we have to become at peace with that. We have to understand that's the truth, and that is our identity in all circumstances. So when these conflicts come along, when we get caught up in sin, and we put ourselves back under the judgment of the law, right? We put ourselves back under the condemnation of God, the fearful expectation that he's going to get us, so that there's going to be some great price to pay. But is that true? Because clearly, the death he died to sin once for all. And if we are identified in him, we are partakers of that new inheritance. So it can't be true that we're placed back under the condemnation of sin. But that's hard to stomach at times when we're caught up, and therein lies the whole consequence of sin. It causes a double-mindedness, a lack of peace, conflict, stress. I mean, you as a believer get caught up in adultery. Try that on. See what that's like. Because in that world, it is nothing but upset. I fortunately don't speak from experience on that. But I know people that have, and it's been terrifically horrible. And so goes any of the other habitual sins. That reminds me of what Paul said to Timothy, that the necessity to hold on to faith and a good conscience. Some have rejected these, and in so doing have shipwrecked their faith. So holding on to faith, the concept of identity, who you are in Christ, etc. But in addition to that, holding on to a good conscience. In other words, trying to not do things that are bad, that are sinful. And the need to put those two together is because whenever you act out of accordance with your identity and you sin, that's in direct conflict, and it will shipwreck your faith. Many of us can testify to that. I can testify to that. So the great news is that we are in Christ, forever in him, safe and secure. And the benefit of not sinning is so that we don't wage war with ourselves and our minds and never experience the peace and joy and love that is in each one of us through our inheritance with Christ. More to come.